Welcome back everyone, Wolfie here, and this is the second part of my Gigantic Hero Focuses discussion video, knocking out the other half of the current hero roster. If you didn't watch part 1, the link is in the description below, and remember that when you're watching this that the part of the details of how to use the focus abilities are all based on my personal opinions and experiences. Beckett's focus is called Airstrike. Beckett calls in an airstrike in a large target area where a missile lands each second for 3 seconds. Enemies within the area take damage from each missile. At rank 1, each missile deals around 250 damage. At rank 2, each missile deals around 300 damage. And at rank 3, each missile deals around 375 damage. Airstrike is another one of those versatile focuses that can be used for massive damage or to deny the enemy from coming into an area. Since the missile area of effect stays the same per rank, even a level 1 airstrike can deal plenty of damage to the enemy team and is especially deadly paired with Margrave or Paco. Beckett has a lot of burst and area of effect damage with her grenade and rockets, so she can gain focus charges pretty quickly. Don't be afraid to use it as often as you want to. Imani's focus is called Kill Shot. Imani loads up 3 max charge bolts and fully zooms in her scope. During a 6-second window, her next 3 shots deal massive damage, hit a wider area, and pierce through all enemies. Each shot deals more damage than the last, but only if it hits an enemy unit. At rank 1, the first shot deals around 450 damage, each consecutive shots gaining 30% increased damage. At rank 2, the first shot deals around 450 damage, each consecutive shot gaining 45% increased damage. And at rank 3, the first shot deals around 450 damage, each consecutive shot gaining 50% increased damage. Killshot does exactly as it sounds because it shreds most heroes to pieces. Hitting all 3 shots of a tier 1 killshot deals well over 1600 damage to a single enemy, meaning that it can straight up murder a quarter of the current hero roster and leave the rest victim to the same fate with just 1 or 2 more regular scope shots. Though Killshot does have amazing potential to shred an entire enemy team, it does take a lucky chance of fate that they would line up perfectly unless you were in a narrow choke point. Don't be afraid to use it on just one person, even if you don't get the kill. Your very presence is more than enough to make the enemy uneasy. HK-206's focus is called Swarm. HK unleashes a massive barrage of rockets over the course of 2 seconds that fly towards his cursor. These rockets will lock onto the first enemy in their trajectory, dealing damage to that enemy and all enemies in a small area around them when they hit. At rank 1, a full barrage will deal around 800 damage. At rank 2, a full barrage will deal around 950 damage. And at rank 3, a full barrage will deal around 1150 damage. Swarm is best utilized when it can hit more than one person, but that shouldn't dissuade you from using it often to help burst down a priority target. Though like Paco, HK's focus is channeled and can be interrupted early, so be careful about positioning and the enemy's hard crowd control. The last thing I would say is to be aware that the missiles don't move at a very fast speed and have trouble going around corners, so it's best to use this focus when the enemy is unable to move or when they're out in the open. Voden's focus is called Natural Roots. Voden fires a blessed arrow towards the target location. On contact, the arrow spreads roots that damage, interrupt, and immobilize all enemies within a medium-sized area after a 0.5 second delay. Hitting an enemy with the arrow directly applies the damage, interrupt, and immobilize effect to them immediately. At rank 1, the roots deal around 200 damage and immobilize for 2 seconds. At rank 2, the roots deal around 250 damage and immobilize for 3 seconds. And at rank 3, the roots deal around 300 damage and immobilize for 4 seconds. Natural Roots would be a better focus if it weren't for the fact that it can be cleansed so easily. In comparison to the bleed focuses of Gnosis or Tydo, getting an immobilized cleanse feels more like you are wasting time spending focus charges when you could have been shooting arrows that are easier to land and deal more damage. Natural Roots also seems to be buggy half the time since most of the heroes can just get out of it with a jump or dash when they're supposed to be immobilized. And even when it does work, a 2-second immobilized doesn't often feel worth it unless your team is actively ready to collapse on the enemy. Though I will say that it does have a redeeming quality of the roots being able to hit enemies below and above the impact point and through small barriers. But personally I find myself not using this focus during battle very often unless I have a rank 2 and I know that I can hit at least 3 people. Charnok's focus is called Flame On. Charnok, after a brief delay, causes 3 pillars of flame to erupt in a wide line directly in front of him that deal damage and knock up enemies inside. The pillars leave behind rings of flame for 4 seconds, and any enemies who are inside take burning damage per second. At rank 1, the pillar deals around 250 damage and the burn deals 135 damage per second. At rank 2, the pillar deals around 400 damage and the burn deals 157 damage per second. And at rank 3, the pillar deals around 550 damage and the burn deals 180 damage per second. Flamon has gotten nothing but nerfs ever since the beginning, and even today it's still one of the most iconic and stronger focuses in terms of raw damage and zoning potential. It covers the largest area of any focus ability, making it one of the better focuses to take advantage of when the enemy enters your territory. Charnok does have a lower focus gain compared to the other ranged heroes, though it is fair since he's very area of effect based, so Flamon complements him very well in that sense. The only issue with Flamon is that the delay in animation can make the focus very obvious when it's coming, especially since Charnok has to move relatively close in comparison to his other abilities if he wants to get the maximum effect. Still, the focus is definitely one of the better in the game at the moment. Mozu's focus is called Death Ray. Mozu channels a deadly beam of energy towards her cursor, slowing and dealing damage to any enemy the beam touches. At rank 1, the beam deals around 880 damage over 1 second and can hit a maximum of 2 targets. At rank 2, the beam deals around 1140 damage over 2 seconds and can hit a maximum of 3 targets. And at rank 3, the beam deals around 1420 damage over 3 seconds and can hit a maximum of 5 targets. Death Ray would be a lot stronger if it weren't for 2 things. 1, the targeting is very sloppy when the enemies are moving horizontally, and 2, Mozu doesn't exactly have the best focus gain in the world even with the faster focus gain upgrades. The beam also has a tendency to swap targets mid-channel even when you're aiming directly at someone, and this is because the beam tracks to the closest enemy between Mozu and her cursor. Though for what the focus does, it still is very strong if you can keep enemies from moving around too much and not get interrupted during your channeling. Mozu already has arguably the best single target damage per second of every hero, but she trades that for also being one of the squishiest. Positioning will be your best friend, else you're bound to get bursted down before you can make any use of Death Ray. Sven's focus is called Chaos Quaff. Sven throws a magical glowing flask to a large target area. On impact with the ground or wall, the flask explodes and dazes enemies inside while also slowing and polymorphing them. Polymorphed enemies are silenced and are unable to sprint or dodge. Hitting an enemy directly with the flask interrupts them, but also causes the flask to have a slight delay before exploding. At rank 1, enemies are slowed and polymorphed for 2 seconds. At rank 2, enemies are slowed and polymorphed for 4 seconds. And at rank 3, enemies are slowed and polymorphed for 6 seconds. Chaos Quaff is in the S tier of focuses alongside Ground and Pound and Vow of Shielding. It affects a very large area, has a great range and projectile speed, and applies one of the best forms of crowd control. With just a 2-second duration, Polymorph renders enemies helpless and very slow since they can't sprint, and it's also one of the few forms of crowd control that cannot be cleansed. Sven has a very high focus gain, allowing him to build up to rank 2 or even rank 3 within a few skirmishes. And because of this, Sven is very good at using his focus for battle or for upgrading creatures throughout the entirety of a match. He's also the only hero in the game who can gain an increased focus area of effect from an upgrade, only adding even more of the usefulness of the ability. Vadasi's focus is called Sanctum of Faith. Vadasi's body radiates with the power of the light, granting her 90% damage reduction and 25% increased healing for a few seconds. At rank 1, these bonuses last for 4 seconds. At rank 2, these bonuses last for 6 seconds. And at rank 3, these bonuses last for 8 seconds. Sanctum of Faith is a powerful focus despite how selfish it is on a support hero. A decent Vadasi knows how to build her focus charges quickly, which causes this problem of people being skeptical of trying to burst her down because they never know when she'll have her focus at the ready. And in the end, this causes her to not use it for most fights unless she's caught by herself. This is why the usual counter to Vadasi is to keep applying poison to her teammates as often as possible instead of trying to chase her away with an assassin. 4 seconds of 90% damage reduction is incredibly strong, and 8 seconds of it is just downright disgusting. A lot of people don't even remember that she gains increased healing half the time, which in of it itself is pretty strong. But even then, with proper positioning and teammates that will peel for you, you'll more than likely end up using your focus charges for upgrading creatures instead. Zenobia's focus is called Cursed Soul. Zenobia curses the enemies within a small target area, putting them into stasis for 4 seconds and draining 50 health per second from them. Enemies in stasis are unable to move or act, but are also completely immune to damage except from damage over time effects that were applied before they were put in stasis. Cursed Soul is currently the only focus in the game that does not gain any bonus effects from a higher rank, though the ability description claims that the stasis effect lasts longer. Whether this is a bug or a tooltip error is currently undetermined. Cursed Soul is probably both the most unique and confusing focus in the entire game. A lot of players argue about how it should be used properly. It can be used on enemies who come too close and can be picked off by your team collapsing on them. It can be used during a big fight to shut down troublesome enemies or to give your team a temporary breather to reposition. It can be used to allow your team to disengage by rendering the enemy team unable to chase. The only wrong way to use Cursed Soul is when your team has already started to use their abilities. Since enemies in stasis are immune to damage, your team could have potentially just wasted several cooldowns and got no damage from them. Zenobia's stasis is also not a full stasis like compared to Bard from League of Legends or Zeratul from Heroes of the Storm. What I mean by that is Cursed Soul does not freeze cooldown timers, meaning that using the ability on a highly mobile hero like an assassin might give them the opportunity to have their ability off cooldown once they exit the stasis and get away easily. It takes a lot of trial and error, but the best way to use Zenobia's focus is to be patient and aware of the strengths and weaknesses of your team composition. But until you learn what those are, use Zenobia's incredibly fast focus taking to upgrade your creatures. And with that, this video has finally come to a close. If you enjoyed watching, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel so you'll be the first to know when more get posted. Leave comments below talking about what you like or dislike about your favorite hero's focus ability. Thank you for watching, have a good day, and I'll see you on the airship.